Hey y'all, I'm Kara Perez, founder of Bravely Go, and this week's video is different from our usual fare on this channel. I am not going to be doing a talking head straight into the camera video today. Instead, I had the opportunity to interview Genesis Hinckley from Genuinely Genesis about growing up as a low-income Latina and changing financial narratives for ourselves and our family. I also grew up low income and I am also Latina, and so this was a really meaningful conversation for me, and I think also a conversation that is largely missing from the financial world in general. 40 million Americans are currently living in poverty, and about 72% of Americans say that cost of living is their biggest financial stressor. Low income or middle income people are the vast majority of people in the United States, and it's my belief that we need to create more content that addresses the financial realities and concerns of this segment of people. Yes, it's always interesting, it's always fun, it's always good to look at high income people and dissect how they got there and what they're doing with their money, but it's also really important that we meet people where they are. And for most of the people living in the United States, where they are right now is in this middle to low income range. Very few people in the United States are high earners. And yet so much of our financial media is slated towards these high earners and the options that they have. So this conversation that I had with Genesis, it's really for the people who are trying to navigate the world they are currently in while also perhaps trying to change financial classes. We have a lot of people who come to the financial education space from high income backgrounds, and we have very few people who come to this space from low-income backgrounds like Genesis and myself. So I think this conversation will be really impactful for people. I know it was for me. And what makes this video different is that it's really more of a podcast style. So feel free to put this on while you are cooking, while you are driving, while you are cleaning, whatever it is. And I hope you enjoy this week's video. Genesis, I'm so jazzed to have you here because I found you. I don't even know. The TikTok algorithm was like, you should know this girl. And once I started watching your content, I was like, yeah, I should know this girl. Also, quick side note, you have amazing skin. So on camera, I was like, oh my God, gorgeous, flawless. Where are the pores? She doesn't have any.
They're there, I promise.
So I was like binging your content, and something that I really love that you're really upfront about and that you deliberately make content around that I feel like so few content creators do is talking about having a low income background. And I have a low income background, so I'm like so jazzed about that. So tell us, what is your history like? What was your childhood relationship with money like? What was your family's financial standing growing up? And like, what is your low income background?
Thank you for the thoughtful question. For context, my parents, they divorced when I was young. And so as a result, my mom had to take care of 3 kids entirely on her own. She immigrated from Bolivia, leaving us with, honestly, her having to take on a lot of different jobs, primarily for the flexibility and because, she never really had the opportunity to seek further education. And so when I think back on my childhood, I think of us moving a lot, primarily because we couldn't find a location where we felt safe enough to stay, and or we would go into like government housing or not, or my older brother was struggling with my parents' divorce, so he would kind of get us in trouble. And so it was a lot of it was a lot of lack of stability. There was no stability in our home. It just wasn't a thing. And so I became very used to concealing the fact that we lived in the basement of someone's house, or concealing the fact that I couldn't afford getting anything at the Scholastic Book Fair. I was used to concealing the fact that we just kept moving from place to place, and it wasn't for something cool like your parents work for the government, or are diplomats, or whatever it is.
Hmm.
That was significantly cooler than, hey, we're just broke.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So much of that resonates with me. My parents are also divorced. And when I was really young, and I have two siblings, I'm like, oh my God, twinning. And I would say my older sibling really struggled with
Mm.
the divorce and then also just like testing boundaries their whole life, really still testing boundaries in some ways. Um, and where are you in the childhood order?
I'm in the middle.
Me too.
Way too
Okay.
many similarities here.
I know, and I feel like, they say a lot of things about middle kids, but I feel like as the middle kid, I was very like peace seeking, and I was very like, okay, well, I'm going to be good in school and I'm going to be kind of the calm in the storm. Did you ever feel like you had to have that role?
I think I tried to, but frankly, because I didn't have my dad in my life, I've realized now as an adult that I really wanted that attention from like a father figure. And I wasn't going to get it from my brothers, and I wasn't going to get it from my mom. So even though school truly became my escape, something that I could control in my life, I still felt that I was always kind of the bad guy, honestly, in, like,
Mm.
my family, and not to the fault of my mom, not to the fault of my siblings. It's just kind of what the story like, the narrative I wrote, uh, when I was growing up, and so I'd say, yeah, I was peace seeking, but I wasn't very good at it.
Yeah, well, you had a lot going on and like what is peace even, a lot of people I feel like are seeking it and very few of us are finding it. So
Yes. Oh,
hard
yeah.
for, like your childhood self too, like, oh, you were a kid. I was a kid. We were all kids. Oh my gosh. And I think these experiences that we've had, and I don't mean to say that like everything that you went through I went through, we're
Mhm.
not exact mirrors, but
Yeah.
all of that comes out today in our content, right? So tell me a little bit about when you decided to start talking about money on the internet, because it's like out of all the things that you could talk about, why did you want to start talking about money?
Early on in mm my seeking of identity, I found that growing up low income was a huge part of how I saw myself, how I felt in the world. And as I matured, primarily through college, I found myself often talking about or finding ways to bring up the fact that I grew up low income because it really changes the way that you see the world. Like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, wow, like, you have houses in multiple locations, and my family has 0." And so, just kind of interactions that I had in college that made me realize, wow, I realized that I was different, but I really am different, and, um, there was so much shame associated with me growing up low income when I was low income that I didn't feel like I could be myself with people. I didn't really get close to people because, "No, I'm not inviting you over to, like, my basement my basement of a home." And so, just a lot of shame associated with it, a lot of embarrassment, and as I matured, I was like, "Oh my gosh, why am I feeling this way?" It's something completely out of my control, and it does not define who I am, what I'm capable of. It's completely just more so my starting line doesn't define where I'm going to finish, and that's when I started realizing this is what I want to talk about. And money is truly just like a journey. Just how we talk about how mental health, right? And the same thing, there's shame associated with not being okay mentally. But then people feel more comfortable talking about it when they've overcome depression, they've overcome anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's no, we can talk about the entire process. And there's no shame around it because it's a process and we're all dealing with it. And so if I think about if tomorrow I suddenly become low income again, I will talk about it because it's normal and it's part of financial progression, the financial journey.
Yes, I completely agree. So many things that you just said resonated so much with me. My little extrovert brain is like, talk about this, talk about that, talk about that. Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like I like to talk about my low income background mostly because I do feel like in the financial sphere that we occupy, there's not a lot of people who have experience with low income
Mm,
or with outright poverty, which I've never experienced. It's
mhm,
a lot of people who are like, I left my well-paying corporate job to become a financial creator or
mhm.
to start my own business or whatever it is. Or like I got my partner supports me or my parents supported me or something like that. And that has just like never been the case. I mean, I am partnered. I've been with my partner 9.5 years,
Wow.
T-bone, but this man cannot, if I stopped making money tomorrow, he could not pay our rent by himself. Like
Yeah,
he's low
yeah,
income
yeah,
now.
yeah.
um, though he comes from a very financially stable background. So it's interesting.
Wow.
Um, but
Yeah.
like, there's layers of privilege to the world that we occupy that I feel that you and I don't have familiarity with. And so I want to talk about it to let my audience know, like, don't have to have worked on Wall Street to understand how to invest. You don't have to have family money to understand how a high yield savings account can work for you or how to buy your first property or whatever it is. So I like to talk about it to kind of make space. That's how I
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you think that you just all you see are barriers to entry. That's all you see, and that's very normal. Like, as humans, we tend to look at the world with a negative lens because that's what will protect you, avoiding
Mhm.
negativity, and so, in reality, everything that I know, I've truly learned from podcasts, books, from having conversations about money with other people, from honestly just doing it myself. And so I completely agree where we have this perspective of, hey, you really don't need to be born into privilege to like be in a financially stable situation.
Yes, yes, 100%. And like you said, I mean, it can be a journey. It's not just like, oh, I don't want to be broke anymore. I'm no longer broke.
Mm.
But it is possible. And I think that that's really important to share the journey. So, what is something or many things, and probably the answer to this question is many things, but what do you think that our fellow financial content creators or like the bigger picture financial media, I'm talking about like Market Watch and CNBC, like these big outlets, what do you think that they get wrong about low income folks? And to an extent, first gen folks like you and I, like something that really bothers me are those videos and those articles that are like what rich people do versus what poor people do. And it's like rich people buy assets, poor people buy video games. And I'm like, oh my God, you're missing a lot of context here. What are some things that you would like to change around the discussion of low income folks?
Man, it's so easy to pass blame and point the finger and say you're low income because of it's your choice essentially. And what's interesting when you ask that, I reflect back on the when I first started creating content. And I was trying to understand what could reach low income communities. And there were times where honestly, I can't remember specifically, but where I didn't know how to reach low income communities. Why? Because I'm not low income anymore. And there is like no matter how hard I try to think back, it won't be the same as if I was low income. So I do want to acknowledge that. And it's interesting because the other day I was thinking, okay, how could I really tune into like thinking like I used to and being in that situation of like feeling shame. And I thought, oh my gosh, what if like we decided to be like low income, like essentially behave as if we were low income for like 6 months. And then I went through this process of like, I do not want to do that ever again. And so I think definitely not passing blame because I think that a lot of the time there's so oh my gosh, it is so complicated why people are low income. It's so complicated. And so truly it's a lack of resources and a lack of opportunity, I think. And that's just putting it like as simple as you possibly could because again, it is very complex. And so I think a lot of like these financial content creators, they want to see you grow, but they also don't wanna meet you where you're at.
Ooh, yeah.
And meeting you where you're at is where I want to be. I wanna see you and be like, "Where you are is okay. What are your goals? Let's get you there." Simple as that.
Mhm. I love how you phrased that. I agree. I just saw something totally unhinged on TikTok. It's these 2 dudes talking to each other, and one of them's like, "It's amazing how many people think 20K months is a lot."
Oh, wow.
And I just like, "Bro, the, like, median income in the United States right now is, like, less than $75,000, and that's for a household, like, and a household, a lot of people don't know this, but it's anyone over the age of 15 who is working. So a household income could include 2 working parents and also a working 16-year-old. So for that to
Mm,
be 75 grand, it really speaks volumes. But, yeah, meeting people where they're at, not where you want them to be, not
yes.
where it would be helpful if they were,
Yes.
like where they're at. That's such a good starting point, I think, and it's a very compassionate starting point. And I often think that we could use more compassion in personal finance. So I'm glad you're creating content.
You and you know what you just remind me of is you said it was 20,000 a lot in a month. And right now, I was just talking to my husband and we're like, dude, we've been spending money like it's our job. Like we've just been going at it. And we're like, "Okay, we need to slow down. Like, let's not get too crazy because we really there it's interesting because we have these fluctuations where we're like, "Wow, we're making so much money," and we start buying plane tickets and this and that and whatever you want and like truly it just kind of gets insane. And then suddenly I'm like, "Nope, we can only have buy 2 apples, 1 onion." Like I feel like there's
Mhm.
extremes that I feel, and truly, I think it's because of my low income background where I'm like, "You know what? We used to spend like nothing, and so if I could spend nothing when we were growing up, then why can't we spend nothing now?" And I truly feel that it's about finding a balance to yes, treat yourself, but also living within your means. And right now, we're living too much within our means. Essentially, like what is it? What is that term when you essentially lifestyle creep.
Yeah, lifestyle
So we're
creep.
like, "Oh, wow, like, we can spend this money," and you just have this desire to spend everything that you have, and so instead, I'm like, "You know what? We gotta find another property to invest that in because otherwise we're just gonna go over here and get too crazy," and so I really want to be more mindful about how we spend our money, and typically I am, but recently we've been kind of crazy. And so I can understand why someone would say, "Oh, 20,000 isn't that much." Uh I mean, first off, it depends on who you are. But I could just understand, and that really is the you start to you just adjust in your mind. It's lifestyle creep. You're like 20,000, like, "Oh, I can make that with one video." And then
Mhm.
just to kind of think about it that way. So I understand. I don't like blame these people for saying these things. It's just a lack of self-awareness and
Mhm.
like awareness of like just having compassion for everyone else in the world that does not make money like they do.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like, you can get used to anything. I mean,
Mhm.
when I was in my 20s and really low income and I was working to pay off my student loans, I lived off of like 10 grand a year and I got used to that, you know?
Wow.
And so I can see on the flip side, like, yeah, having a 20K month can become normal, but it is a very out of touch thing to say,
Yeah.
especially right now while everything
Oh,
is
yeah.
really expensive. Like, I just couldn't believe this man said it with a straight face.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying about fluctuating between I find myself doing the same thing now that I have more disposable income and now that I have a certain amount invested, that makes me feel secure in some ways and it also feeds my insecurity like it's never quite enough. Oh, I hit this
Mhm,
milestone. I need to hit the next milestone. I need to hit the
mhm.
next milestone faster. And so I can also see how what's that guy's name? He's a YouTuber, Graham something. Graham.
Graham Stephan?
Yes.
Mm.
I saw him on a podcast because this was at least a year ago. He was worth $5 million. dollars.
Mm.
And the podcast host was like, and is that enough money? And he was like, no. Now I used to think 5 million was enough, but now I really don't see how I can live
Mm.
without 10 million. Like I need to hit 10. And I actually thought it was very self-aware of him because he said, and once I hit 10 million, I'll probably want to start aiming for 20. Like, I don't know if it'll ever be enough. And I was like,
Mm.
okay, well, at least you're aware that you're kind of like in this cycle. And at the same time, I know that's not a cycle I want to get caught up in. I want to know
Yes.
what is enough for myself and I want to be content there. Like, I don't want to be on this endless rat race or like treadmill of
Yes.
I need to earn more so that I can spend more so that I can, whatever it is, like try and fill this void. I want to be able to fill it and be like, it is full. I am full.
Yes. Yes, and see, there are things that I do intentionally to not let lifestyle creep up on me, you know? And one of the things that I do intentionally is, one, I ride the bus. I don't need a second car. I could buy
Mm-hmm.
another car. I don't need it. Like, I will find a way to honestly experience inconvenience to hold on to my humility and hold on to awareness of how other people live. Because I believe that that's if you experience too much convenience in your life, that's when you start to lose your humility and gratitude.
Mm.
And so that's one thing that I do. Another thing that I do is, in our house is a 1950s house. It is in a great location, but sometimes I'll go over to another friend's house and they have like these very like this very just like beautiful brand new homes that cost upwards of 600 to $700,000, and mine cost 430. And so when I reflect that, I could easily be like, you know what, Seth, where I'm ready for another house. Let's find something bigger, something more like glamorous. And could we afford it? Yes. But that would just deviate from really what means a lot to me, 'cause that is the functionality of a home. I want it to be small. Why? Because the bigger it is, the more you fill it up and the more time that you will need to take care of it. Like, it's just more problems in my head. And so that's something that I'm doing intentionally. Like, I want things to break in my house. Like, I want things to for me to think in a way that's more creative of, oh, like, how can I make this area that has kind of some character into something a little bit more beautiful? And maybe that's a weird way to think about things, but I really want to be that, like, filthy rich person that you have no idea that she's filthy rich. That
Yeah.
is truly, like, my goal in my life, because you know what? I'm not I was talking to my career coach the other day through my employer, and he was really trying to figure out what it is that I'm searching. Like, why do I create content? Why am I like seeing a career coach? Why am I writing a book? Why am I doing all of these things? And by the end of it, we came to the conclusion that the reason why I do everything is because of peace. I am searching for peace. And is a bigger house going to grant me peace? Not the peace that I'm looking for. And so those are just very small things that I do to try to kind of keep me where I want to be, primarily level headed, especially when it comes to money.
Yes, I can really relate. I do the same thing. And it's a discussion that I have with my partner all the time. Like, we have one car, like you were
Mm.
saying, you're a one car household, and he
Mhm.
bikes to work. And
Yes.
our car is a little bit older. And he was like, I'm getting a little embarrassed of our car. And I was like,
Mm.
I'm so fucking proud of our car because we don't have a car payment.
Yes.
Like this car is paid off. I will drive this car to the ground. And he's like,
Yes.
I don't know, the paint, it looks a little weird over here. Like it's kind of old. And I was like, who cares? Like, that's not the status I'm chasing. The status I am chasing is enoughness, is peace, and ultimately is free time. Like, I'm very interested in early retirement and not needing to work and having the ability to sleep in. I love to sleep. Oh my God, I love
Mm.
sleeping. If I want to sleep until 10 on a Tuesday, like that is true luxury to me. Not having a Lambo as our car.
Yeah, it depends on what you're chasing, like, I think it's like I know someone that drives a Porsche, it's like, okay, like, I like, ask yourself why. Why do you need that? And you know what? If you are at peace with your answer to that, completely okay. But when I start to be like, "Oh, I should have gone a Tesla because," like, "Okay, well, why?" Even though it'd be actually inconvenient because I have to search for chargers. Uh, why are you chasing that? And
Hmm.
when the answer is for other people for external validation,
Hmm.
then that is when you're doing it wrong, because
Yes.
that should tell you, like, red flag, you need to find more security within yourself and not seek security among the world.
Yes. Because truly, like, to quote, I believe 2011 Drake, YOLO. It's the
Yeah.
motto, but, like, I often think, do I wanna get to the end of my life and be like, "Wow, I'm so glad I lived for other people's expectations of me." Like, really, no, I don't, that's not what I'm going for. And it's interesting because 'cause you're a parent, I'm not a parent, and so you have a tiny human that you are raising and, like, lessons that you are imparting to them, and a lot of things that we've talked about here today are definitely things that I would imagine you would want your child to, like, maybe not right now, he's
Mhm.
young, but, like, in the
Yeah.
process of raising your kid, like, you wanna talk about things like privilege, and you wanna talk about things like enough and goal setting and hard work and community building and stuff. So, how are you approaching money for your child and I don't know, children, maybe, no pressure.
Yeah, 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 yeah. You know, what's interesting is all throughout growing up, and I feel like most parents do this, it might be even more so within the Latino community, is like parents reminding you, like, "Oh, when I was a kid, like, I didn't even have a backpack. I went to school with like a plastic bag," and just kind of like almost shaming you into feeling grateful for what you have.
Mhm.
And that's probably not where I wanna, like, the direction that I wanna go in personally. More so, I want to really focus on gratitude, and sharing is something that I'm really trying to, uh, like, freaking ingrain in his brain.
Mhm.
So, an example is recently, at church, they gave him fruit snacks or something like that, and I asked him in the car, I was like, "Oh, can mommy have one?" And he said, "No." And I was like, "Okay, I respect that." And then later on, I was eating some chocolate and he asked me if he could have some. And I said, "No, this is mom's chocolate." And so essentially showing him, "Hey, like, if you said no earlier, and that's a choice and that's okay. I can respect that." And so because I respected that for you, then like you are to respect that for me.
Mm.
Maybe you could think, "Oh, well, you should have given the example to, like, share with him." And of course, I do that, but it's more so to show him that it feels good to share, and it feels, like, good to enjoy something with someone else, and to show him the difference between the 2. And so recently, oh my gosh, this was just the cutest freaking thing. But recently, I was going on a walk with a friend, and I had snacks in my bag as a mom always does, and I offered him a tiny little piece of chocolate. It was like a prepackaged little piece of chocolate, and it wasn't really breakable. It was just like one bite chocolate, and I handed it to him, and he immediately grabbed the chocolate and split it into 2, gave
Mm.
my friend one, and then tried to split his piece with me. And mind you, he's like 3.5 years old, almost 4, and he did that entirely on his own. He did not, like, I did not have to tell him to, and he did that. And so what I really am just trying to show him is that there are things that we're going to want that some people have, and we will want them to share with us. And so we want to behave as if we are the other person and essentially make us both happy, all of us happy, everyone happy by sharing. And that in and of itself is gratitude for what you have because you see its worth and its impact on other people.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. And the world could use more people who are good at sharing. Actually, one of my favorite things about my partner is he's an excellent sharer. And
Yeah.
I will admit, it took me a long time to learn to share. I feel like as an adult is when I learned. Growing up, I was not good at sharing, and neither were my siblings. So I'm glad you're teaching that. And I think that's a good, I like what you said too, of like coming from a place of gratitude, of like, yes, we're going to enjoy so many amazing things. And it's not going to be a competition between me and my son of like,
Mhm.
I had to struggle, you have to struggle more. Or
Mm,
like, I had to struggle, you don't have to struggle. And I need to remind you of that. I need
mm,
to like punish you with the fact that I struggled.
please.
Like, no, I think that's weird. That's like perpetuating generational trauma, and we don't want to do that.
Trying to get rid of all the bad stuff as much, he's not going to come out perfect. I'm sure he's going to,
Hmm.
like 20 years or whatever, he's going to be like, I'm traumatized because my mom did this, I'm like, Benicio, I did everything in my power. You have less trauma. I hope that's the goal, right?
That is the goal. That really, yes, no one is perfect. That's for damn sure. Whew, man. Okay, well, this is my final question. What are your financial goals for like the next year of your life? We're going to keep it kind of short term. What are you like really focused on? And you can be as detailed as you want.
Within the next year, let's say like by the end of 2024, I want to have two tiny homes in Kentucky. That is like my real estate financial goal. By the end of the year, I decided that I want $50,000 in my savings account, in addition to what I currently have. That means starting whenever I made this goal, which was a few weeks ago. Actually, I think that was a few days ago. So, that's a goal. I've decided that that's going to be through social media. I don't know exactly how yet, but I believe that it's going to happen because I'm a visionary, or delusional is what people like to call, but I feel like delusional is very negative.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know what? Can I just tell you, delusional is like you're actually, it's when you think something's going to happen and it doesn't happen. That's what delusion, like people use it wrong. You're not like, if you're delusional, it's because you think something's gonna happen and it literally never happens. So if it happens, then you're not
Yeah.
freaking delusional, you're a freaking visionary. So sorry, that's my spiel because people, I don't know, they just kind of hop on the bandwagon and they don't realize what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say those are like my two big financial goals. And by the end of the year too, I'll be maxing out my 401k for the first time. And that's very exciting just because in the past I've instead invested that in real estate. And so it's exciting just to be able to use my company match. And those are my financial goals.
Oh my
Simple
gosh.
as that.
Yes, I love them. Very clear, very focused on asset accumulation. You're definitely, you've got a vibe right now. I love it. Okay, well, tell the people where they can find you on the internet.
You can find me Genuinely Genesis on TikTok and Instagram are my main social medias. And then you can find me at genuinelygenesis.com. And please say hi. Let me know where you found me because I truly will respond to Instagram DMs primarily.
Girl, I am up in those DMs. I have such a love-hate relationship with DMs, specifically on Instagram, because I love talking. I feel like I have a really good community on Instagram. I know people throw around that word, but my Instagram followers like hold me down. They're
I
so
love
cool and fun and supportive, and I love them. But I hate the emoji responses.
Oh,
Hate the emoji
that's
responses.
funny. That's
So when
funny.
I go into the DMs and it's just an emoji, I'm like, say something. What are you doing here?
Yeah, honestly, like, tell me, "How's your day going?" Like, "Let's talk about it. Your finances
Exactly.
good?" You know? "What's the
Oh my
update?"
gosh.
Like, no, I
Yeah.
agree. I agree, I agree with that. That's funny.
So silly. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me. This was amazing. You're great, and I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Kara.